Hi, everyone. Welcome to Risk and Considerations around third-party AI in media and entertainment. I appreciate you joining us for today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so the presentation deck and recording will be distributed within 1 to 2 business days afterwards, so you'll get a copy of this. Another important item is we are here active and live, so we can answer your questions at any point throughout this. So please do feel free to submit your questions throughout. We will also have a time at the end of the webinar to allow extra space for Q&A. There will also be a quick survey sent to you after the webinar. We really appreciate you filling that out, giving us some feedback on this process. If you're not familiar with Richie May and our cyber practice, we are really well versed in translating any of the cybersecurity and technical risk into actual business risk. So what that means is we know what the book says, but we know how to apply it to your organization more effectively. So this will allow you to make some better educated decisions on more effective and efficient methods. So we were founded in 1985, have focused on really developing our deep expertise to provide services for multiple different organizations at the highest level. So we have multiple services that allow us to hold executive positions at organizations from small companies to global enterprises. And really our unmatched expertise is what we like to focus on to allow us to offer seasoned practical and executive advice to solve even your most complex cloud and cybersecurity problems. Today, we're really focusing on the AI revolution in media and entertainment. So this is really transforming how content's created. And if you're in this space, I'm sure you're well aware of it. You hear it consistently and often. This is affecting distribution in different ways, how content's consumed, and really offering high levels of efficiency and personalization in different elements. So there's a lot of those benefits that come from utilizing it, and that's why we're seeing a big spread. So media companies and a lot of them that we advise with and work with in different areas are increasingly outsourcing some of the AI capabilities. Some of that is knowingly, some of it is not. So their vendors are specializing in different things, whether it's VFX to various other elements that you may be engaged in. This does allow kind of quicker adoption by outsourcing some of that, but some of the unchecked AI implementation is leading to significant risk. So those things include data breaches, regulatory fines, and even reputational damage around these items. And that's what we're looking to unpack here. So I am Parker Brissett. I'm a senior cybersecurity advisor and virtual chief information security officer here at Richie May, serving many, many different clients across industries and different platforms. So I've got about 20 years experience in the industry and have also developed a lot of our AI assessment technologies here at Richie May, and a big background in providing effective risk mitigation and risk management strategies to different organizations. I'm also joined by the lovely Nick Matlock, who is one of our attorneys and not at Richie May, but one of our partners that we work with in different areas, who has a wide breadth of knowledge, especially around AI and regulation and compliance and all those fun things. So Nick, give us a quick introduction.
Thanks, Parker. First of all, thanks to Richie May for having me. It's an honor to be here talking about this with you. So I have a firm in Providence, Rhode Island called the IO Librum Law Firm. where we work with small businesses and very small businesses, oftentimes startups, and try to help them understand their risks and their liabilities associated not only with implementation of AI, but dealing with the world that is implementing AI at various forms and in various success levels across the world. So my background is heavily based in IT. It's how I put myself through undergrad and law school, and did some work with IBM and three-letter agencies and the cybersecurity realm as well. So I talk tech and talk lawyer at the same time, hopefully not in the same voice, but I look forward to having this conversation with you, Park.
Yes, me too. It's going to be a fun one. So for today's agenda, we're going to cover a couple of key points, right? So we want to start with the landscape currently with AI in media and entertainment, going into some key risk that we've seen in multiple different areas, but particularly media and entertainment with third-party AI solutions. Then we want to provide you some methodology in assessing your third-party risk, because at the end of the day, if you just take a stance of, no, we're not going to do AI, you're either going to be left behind or you're going to be lying to yourself, because it's going to be happening, and we want you to be able to assess and mitigate your risk as is appropriate for your organization. We'll cover some of the practical recommendations that we also have for media companies and protecting your data, your IP, and we'll also go over some of the case studies that we've seen with some real world examples and the impact around that. As well as a Q&A discussion, as I mentioned previously, towards the end. And we also will have some poll questions throughout. If you wouldn't mind filling those out, that actually gets us in to our first poll question of the day. How familiar are you with the use of AI in the media and entertainment industry? So take a couple seconds here just to click one of those options, and then we'll present the results here in just a second.
We have about 50% of votes in, so we'll give you just a couple more seconds to get those votes in here, and we'll go ahead and close this out.
Thank you, Gabby. Gabby's one of our marketing directors here that's assisting with our webinar. So great. A lot of familiarity around the use of AI tools and some basic understanding as well. So great to see that. So we'll be able to provide you some more tactical and practical information with the AI use that you are familiar with. So let's jump right into understanding some of the current landscape in media and entertainment. We've got a lot of common applications here, right? Whether it's personalized content recommendations, automating any of the editing or production processes, as well as using some predictive analytics throughout that. So this spans across different types of AI, right? So when we say the word AI, we're talking about different technical elements, things like large learning models, you've got generative AI, you've got machine learning. So there's all of those different elements that come into play. You even see that what used to be referred to as algorithms are really having some layers of AI applied to them, and now kind of adopting that name of AI algorithms. There's a lot we see as well from the role of third parties, right? No media and entertainment organization is doing all of the work in-house and all on their own. So most organizations out there are familiar with the TPN process and the risk that comes from third-party engagement. So we have seen a lot of vendors providing some more specialized tools around AI, and they both work with current workflows and enhance capabilities without you needing to develop that skill set in-house. So again, huge benefits from some of these integrations. So some of the pitfalls that we see as well is losing some control over your IP, and as well as some potential ethical issues in terms of biases built into it, and overall data concerns. And that's kind of what we'll also be addressing in some of these elements. Nick, any other applications that you might see in the media and entertainment space, even from like the legal side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to permeate pretty much every aspect of it as it comes around. Things like talent acquisition, and just vetting people, type of thing. All of that's going to be touching or having vast arrays of decision making more and more turned over to AI, willingly or unwillingly, among various teams. So we're already seeing this within HR. As to screening candidates and screening applications as being done heavily by AI now, because HR teams aren't getting large enough or any bigger, or recruiters aren't getting any more capable, type of thing. So they have to do things. Unfortunately, that means we are introducing or reinforcing some substantial bias. And so I know we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward, but yeah, pretty much there's going to be no part of business that's untouched by AI. In some way, and media and entertainment is going to be just as vulnerable as every other industry at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those key risks that we're seeing, we've touched on a little bit, is really around the data itself, right? So whether that's a potential breach of your sensitive content and user data, that comes standard with any vendor engagement. That comes standard with any amount of data, right? But with AI, we're definitely seeing additional risk that has not presented itself before. And a lot of it is in these models not being able to provide assurance around the protections and the way they utilize data. Obviously, this also leads to impact on audience trust. Audiences really do attach to brands, and any impact with data security does impact trust overall. There's also a lot of up and coming regulatory compliance risk. So you do still have things like GDPR and CCPA from a privacy perspective that come into play with how you interact with AI. And there's risk around the legal and financial consequences of non-compliance. While there's not something specifically major around AI right now, I know Nick has some extra insights into what that potential risk might look like.
So yeah, and as usual, the laws and the regulations lag behind the technology, sometimes by as much as a decade, and I don't think that we're going to see that change for AI either. Like we're seeing, the administration and we're seeing Congress start to talk about it in their typical technology lacking ways, but we're not going to expect governance from a regulatory body to be meaningful for several years. However, what we are seeing is the groups like the FTC and the FCC start to reinterpret their existing rules in ways to try to move that forward. So unfortunately, that means they're saying it's an existing rule and you should have already known that this was going to be done that way. And so you kind of can get caught on being in non-compliance by implementing a AI tool without the proper kind of guidance and whatnot. And the privacy laws are very much built this way. They're built with as much vagueness as possible, as much overreaching and overarching kind of guidelines, and GDPR being one of the more extreme in that way, of we'll tell you whether you violated it once we tell you you violated it, a level of guidance on it. So you really do have to take a conservative approach to a lot of these items. And anytime you're dealing with regulated data, consider very carefully whether an AI tool is the right tool to continue to process that or not. And the more regulated the data, probably the less applicability we are going to have for AI, at least at, say, public model or a not privately, developed and implemented model type of situation. And then your less structured data, your more business data is certainly more ripe for taking advantage of those AI tools that are new and on the market in that way.
Yeah. And some added risk around this as well that we're seeing is some bias and fairness, right? So whether that is your HR platform screening candidates and being unaware of potential biases in that system, or even in the content that may be generated from these AI systems, that it could continue to perpetuate bias. There are some various ethical implications, right, around using AI. We've seen multiple issues around, certain chatbots and different things that are released representing a brand, and that turning into very hateful speech from it and producing not great content that affects audience perception of different organizations. The other areas that you may see risk around AI is some of the reliability of various AI solutions, right? As these things scale, they're consuming large amounts of compute power as well as energy, and so there's potential disruptions if you're leaning heavily on AI to kind of help with your operations and business overall. There are some additional legal risks that come around this, especially around IP and other areas. So Nick, give us some of these great insights.
Sure. And before I do that, I want to make sure we add the appropriate legal disclaimer in here that this is not legal advice for you, and you need to talk to your own attorneys and your own legal advisors, to make decisions on your part. This is for information purposes only, and perhaps a little entertainment purposes too. But there's three buckets that I'm putting this into. There's hundreds of legal risks that you could run into, but these are the three big ones we're seeing show up again and again. There's ones that you should be aware of, or at least be conscious of as you move forward here. So intellectual property is one of the most hotly debated parts of this, and there's a lot of intellectual property risk from the models themselves, as they've all been sued now by by various content owners, maybe even some which are sitting in this webinar right now, for the misuse of their copyrighted information and the use of that to train models, and whether that's fair use or whether that's permissible under the laws written back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that protect this content and information before we've even contemplated AI in that way. So the other part of this is that the people who use the use these tools to create content may actually inadvertently infringe upon those rights as well, since we have stored all of this copywritten material in the database. Outputting it in a way of maybe a violation of some of those copyrighted elements, or certainly maybe a violation of some trademark elements. And they may be done by somebody who has no knowledge of that trademark that they're infringing upon whatsoever, or no knowledge of that copyright in that way. But the way the laws are written, that doesn't matter. It's not about whether you knowingly infringed upon a trademark or you knowingly infringed upon a copyright. That doesn't actually apply to the violation of that intellectual property rights that they're gone away. So definitely, if you have AI in your pipe stream for creating content, you need to have good intellectual property screening protocols for the works that are generated out of it, to guard against those chances that way. But the other part is there's some of these models that actually will retrain on it, but even if they don't retrain on it, you are exposing trade secrets. So this trade secrets being another category of intellectual property. By exposing trade secrets to a model or to a third party, it actually can become a lot more difficult for attorneys to defend somebody who wants to infringe upon those trade secrets down the line. So if you allow all of your employees to upload trade secrets to ChatGPT or Claude or some of these other models in that way, you know, it's going to be harder to say, well, you're exposing those trade secrets. Clearly, you're not protecting them. We're not going to let you enforce those trade secrets against some third party who may be trying to exploit you for them in that way as well. So it really is, as going back to my previous statement, you know, your regulated data, which may be regulated by a government, but you should also be regulating your data internally. What is your confidential information? What is your information you want to keep secret? And really having hard questions about whether that content should be uploaded to these models, and if so, under what conditions. We've seen substantial amount of deep fakes, and the capability of those deep fakes just awes me sometimes, of the ability to really impersonate both voice and face and likeness of a person. It's never been easier, and we have ancient laws on our books for this right of publicity and against anti-defamation, and that defamation goes not only against individuals, but you can actually see defamation of brand. So think of the scenario of Big Bird smoking a cigarette. You know, there couldn't be anything more off-brand for Sesame Street than that, right? But the ability of modern AI tools to create that is trivial today, you know, absent the guardrails that a lot of these larger tools have put in place on it. But you know, you get around some of those with some of the prompt hacking and whatnot, and now all of a sudden you can infringe upon a brand or defame a brand in a way that could actually create some significant legal liability, you know, even if done as a joke or even done as a meme in that way. So it's really important to make sure that, you know, anytime we're dealing with depictions of individuals, which may be models or which may be part of our cast and crew, that we have the ability to do so using AI tools as well. So that way we're not taking things like an actor's, you know, reshoot and turning it into an AI model's reconfiguration of that in a deepfake kind of way, which actually could violate the contracts in that as well. And that's kind of my third point on this, is that our contracts have not been written to account for all of the uses of AI, because they change pretty much every 6 weeks. We get new abilities and new uses and new capabilities in it, and they're time saving and they're amazing and they're actually functional. But we pretty much contract every, you know, 1 to 5 years is when we write our contracts. And then everybody, I'm sure, loves getting the lawyers back involved to go and renegotiate those contracts with brand new terms, you know, and then you can create the writer's strike or the other strike because you want to do things with AI that takes money out of people's pockets, and that creates more political issues internally. So make sure that your contractual liability doesn't create additional problems for you by using your AI on even your non-structured, your non-sensitive, your non-confidential data. You could run into a lot of those additional problems there.
Yeah, those are some great insights, Nick. I really appreciate that. We're going to jump into our next poll question here. How confident are you in the data security measures of the AI vendors your company's currently using? This is up on your screen. Again, please select one of these options. There's no wrong answer, as they say, right? This is really for us to gauge some of the depth that you may have around security measures and help us provide some more pointed feedback potentially throughout the rest of the content that we have. So we'll give you another couple seconds to fill that out and stay engaged with us. And as a reminder, you're also welcome to ask questions as we go through this presentation as well. So have at it. Great. Some good results here overall. Everybody's feeling somewhat confident, right? Trusting the vendors, but definitely there's some more that can be done around that. So that is perfect. Love that. We're going to get into some of the methodologies that we have around assessing third-party AI risk. So from an overall vendor risk perspective, we're covering a lot of the same areas that you may cover from any other vendor risk, right? This isn't necessarily a new process in totality, but it is a new field, new area to consider, right? So looking at it from your vendor's background and compliance, right? So you may already have existing contracts. And so you do need to still do your due diligence, right, in managing your vendors and really ensuring their compliance around various controls and their governance of AI in their organization. There's new technical controls that are being introduced here, right? So your standard set of the TPN or other vendor assessments are generally not looking at the in-depth technical controls that are available around AI models. Some of those are still pretty standard, right, from data encryption and access control. And there's also a lot more controls around adversarial robustness, right, in the models so that the training that these models kind of conduct ongoing can't be poisoned, right? And so there's a lot more security measures that can be put in place, and it's very important to make sure that that's part of your methodology in assessing vendor risk. Some of the other areas, we've talked about it again and again, it's that data security, right? How is data being handled and how is it being retained? What types of data are you being trained on, right? What was the model trained on originally, and how much of our data is going to retrain your model, and then that is going to be a new iteration that is now going to be used by more organizations, right? You need to ask those questions around the data handling and ensuring that anything that was given can be deleted after your engagement ends or a certain amount of time. So also making sure it does align with your security standards. So if you don't have an AI governance board or perspective already in your organization, it's important to get that set up so you do understand what your own organization is going to set as a standard. Overall, the fairness and bias mitigation, those are some very specific questions and analysis that you can do with any of these AI models to figure out, hey, how much are we testing for bias in these? How much is your vendor actually ensuring that the results are accurate and fair, as well as allowing yourself to conduct some regular audits for that bias detection. And that could be some of those legal components as well, where Nick, you might have some insight of how to add some of these components into your overall vendor management.
Yeah, obviously your contract is kind of king with that, but if you're every contract that you write or have attorneys write going forward should include comments or structures at the very minimum of what can be used with AI and what can't be done with AI. And again, let's write those in a way that we can allow them to be adjusted, right? So maybe throwing those in appendices or throwing those in a way where we can say, evolving over time, we can change that data in that way. But not talking about it, just letting it be the elephant in the room, means you're consenting to whatever they want to be done and however they want to use that data and however their security standards are, and their security standards may not address those specifically, in a way that you'd want, type of thing. So I'd say the more communication you can have with us, the better. The more upfront, on the table, this is where we use AI or generative AI or large language model, or these are the models that we're allowed to use, or these are the conditions that you're allowed to use. That's where you will be successful moving on.
Absolutely. And that's where we get into some of our practical recommendations here for you. And one of our next poll questions as well of how thoroughly does your organization assess the risks associated with third-party AI vendors? I know a lot of the media and entertainment space is heavily reliant on TPN, right? And third-party attestation of security controls. And while the TPN has not evolved to specifically look at AI, there are things that you could still be doing without relying on that third party. So conducting your own assessments and things like that. So would be great to see how many of you out there are doing more comprehensive assessments or maybe relying on some of those third party assurances or even vendor assurances. So great. Yeah, definitely common to have that level of basic assessments, and obviously everyone's always looking to improve, and with the technology constantly advancing, there's a lot to consider there. So with some of the more practical implementations around methodology, we strongly recommend an actual risk assessment framework to adopt, and particularly around AI and the use of AI. So we at Richie May do have the Richie May AI questionnaire that we can get engaged with you and any of your vendors to perform an assessment. That is what we're referencing as the RAKE. This is really pointed and focused on the AI controls, the AI technology, and various areas of assessment in that sense. So part of your risk assessment framework should have a comprehensive process for how you're selecting your vendors and what that evaluation process looks like. There should not be any single individual in your organization that can, from start to finish, onboard a vendor and start engaging with them. There should be a evaluation process followed. And again, at Richie May, we do have a lot of that content and direction that we can advise on and assist with making sure that that gets properly established for you. Some of the other areas where Nick, you could probably provide some great insights of practical steps around contractual safeguards.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you already have these clauses and these elements in place with all of your vendor or vendor contracts. But if you don't, now's the precipice to get that in place, right? So data ownership, who owns the data, who owns the output of the data, understanding that outputs from most outputs today from a copyright perspective are not copyrightable type of thing. So you own the data only to the extent that you control it, or only to the extent at which you manage it yourself, and once it's out in the world, it's not protected by U.S. law as far as a copyright perspective right now. But also liability, if somebody who takes responsibility for checking the bias, the outputs in that way, and to what level of liability is somebody going to take? Does your insurance, is a commercial liability insurance, cover that, or is that a professional liability element? Maybe you only have general commercial liability, and so you're going to be undercovered in a way that you never have been before. And certainly the compliance issues of data movement, data management, data access. If you're uploading it to tools where you don't know, you're uploading it to tools where you don't know where they store or how they store or what they do with that information, you could be transmitting regulated data across borders or collecting regulated data in a way that you never intended or never wanted to before, especially if you outsource some of the marketing or data collection aspects of your business in that way. So media and entertainment, it's all about having that data and having that end user audience feedback in order to generate new and better clientele. So there are certainly certain scenarios where that vendor loop is very small. They're developing a VFX for a video, type of thing, or for a movie, and you can close that very tightly. It's a very quick process. Those aren't really what we are worried about at this very moment. It's everything ancillary to that. It's everything part of the larger universe of the business operation of a media entertainment that really gets impacted by this, and needing the most amount of contractual safeguards in a way that security practitioners have not yet had to delve deeply into in the past.
Yeah, and that's where it really comes into jumping in the training and awareness as well, right? So huge to make sure you've got collaboration across your legal teams, IT teams, and different business uses in how they're engaging with vendors, how they're utilizing it internally, and assessing those various areas where there could be added risk to your organization. So collaboration's key, and actually having a practical implementation around reducing your AI risk. The other element is making a intentional investment in educating all of your team members around AI risk and around the specifics with any of your vendor engagements. So that means, hey, you cannot use this type of data with this vendor, but you can use this kind. So that covers some of those liabilities and other issues that may come up. And again, you can't just ignore this. And if you think that your teams aren't interacting with AI, you would be wrong, just straight up. Everyone out there has some touches there. And so if you're not educating around the proper uses of AI, you are exposing yourself to additional risk, and should be an important part of any training and awareness that you're conducting. So a couple of key case studies and some of the real world examples that we've got here. I'm going to jump into one specifically around biases, right? So algorithm driven content bias. In Netflix, they have some of their algorithms that are recommending content and doing this to suggest certain types of videos and hoping to keep people engaged longer. So this uses their viewing history, right? But we've seen that reinforces some biases, whether that's racial or gender stereotypes, and it can lead to narrowing of content diversity and limiting exposures to the rest of the platform. And we have actually seen that in the real world. So this is really important to ensure that any AI model, whether it's your third-party vendor or in-house developed, is not unintentionally perpetuating those biases. So ongoing monitoring and adjustments as you're going through this is going to be really important on promoting that fairness and diversity in that element. And Nick, I know you have some great insights around this as well.
Yeah, so I mean, let's first acknowledge that this is extremely hard right now. These are black boxes for the most part that we're putting in. We don't understand how these models work in any meaningful way. And so anytime we're trying to put guardrails or trying to eliminate bias for this, we end up introducing a bit more, and Google has been their own worst enemy at doing this, when they try to ensure a multicultural output of all the generated images of people, and ended up creating, historically inaccurate depictions of people when asked for historically accurate examples of that. It can be embarrassing. It can be, pretty pretty detrimental to a business environment. So I'd say the most important part about this is to recognize that what is being outputted from these models has no business sense, absolutely no capability of determining whether it's good or not, just whether it is or is not what you asked it to do. And it's going to be based upon all of the everything that it thinks it knows, but also everything that the model's trainers thinks it should know, and everything that you put in it that it thinks it should know. And so you've got at least three, probably closer to 3 million, but at least 3 different inputs of bias along the way, some trying to counteract other bias, where you kind of create this this Rubik's cube, of different problems associated with it. And at the end of it, you've got to determine whether it's good or not. So really, this is an area that I think will see the most amount of regulation come quickly because of the TikTok algorithms and Congress being pretty hot on all that. Depending upon how November goes, we may see that reignite in a new way or in a significant way. But I'd say, to the extent that you can be aware of it and be focused on it, you'll probably be okay in making intelligent decisions to counter whatever the artificial intelligence puts out.
Yeah, and that's where it definitely comes into play to make sure that you are actually auditing this and assessing this control, right? So as long as you are aware of it and putting human eyes on it, you can typically identify pretty quickly with at least a broad set of input from a diverse group in identifying some of those biases. Where we also see some issues, and we've talked about this a little bit, is in some of the privacy concerns. One big use case that we've seen is the Cambridge Analytica scandal, right? And how it utilized millions of Facebook users' data without direct consent, building profiles, targeting specific political advertising. And while inherently this algorithm that they've developed is not was not initially labeled as AI, this is part of that growing concern for what AI is capable of, because we started with the basic algorithms that didn't consider any privacy concerns, and AI is just an accelerant of that. So these areas where you're collecting massive amounts of data, analyzing it, and using it to kind of, whether it's portray specific information or get users to go a certain direction, huge concerns around privacy. So it is super important to make sure, again, that your third-party vendors are complying with the privacy regulations and using any of that personal data ethically. So really, really important around this area. And I know we'll beat a dead horse here a little bit. And Nick, you've already kind of touched on some of these components around privacy, but give me a little bit more insights around how concerning this can be.
Yeah, the privacy regulations, all of them right now, whether it be Europe's with GDPR, California's, China's, even Canada's, to everything, they're holding the data collector, the data owner responsible. And they are not allowing for an oops factor in this, or for a gee golly, I didn't realize element of this. They hold them accountable, and the fines are extreme and can be detrimental to an entire business unit for not doing that. So the good news is that there's no new AI regulations, that following our data collection and data management practices that we should have been following since 2014, when we started learning about all this being a critical aspect of business, will save you, will absolutely save you. And it's just, if you can't do that, or if you don't want to hire the legal team to really read the GDPR and interpret your data and whatnot, the two words of the bottom part here, ethically and transparently. Explain what you're going to do with your data, and then do that. Don't do something more than that. Don't do something less than that. Do that. Just be very clear about what you want with the data, and then ethically do that. If you want to do more with the data, go get more consent. If you or delete the data and collect it again with that new parameter in place. If you do that, you are on the right side of 99% of privacy regulations, and I get it that that's not a very favorable, like, yeah, but we've got the data, let's just use it, type of thing, and double down. But ethics of privacy laws, as they're being implemented, as we understand them today, say you must treat that data ethically. And if your data collection did not include an AI statement, your use of that data with AI could be a violation, or could be seen by a regulator after the fact as an extension of that data. So I know that's putting a really fine point on it. It's a lot more nuanced of an issue. Again, talk to your attorneys, talk to your legal counsel if you want to do something, get advice specifically for your scenario. But take that as your general rule, as kind of somebody looking at the wins and trying to provide some practical advice moving forward.
Yep, absolutely. Great advice here. And that actually gets us to our last question here before we open it up to questions from you all, is which risks do you consider the most critical when using third-party AI in the media and entertainment space? This is, a big question for us, and helpful for us to get some insight into a little bit of what's keeping you up at night around AI and its different use cases, and what's kind of transpiring with your day-to-day work. So please give us a little bit of feedback there, add some clarity for us on some of those risks, and we'll give you another second or two here and post those results. Great. Data security and privacy, IP protection. That is the most common element that we're having in terms of conversation with any of our clients, especially in the media and entertainment space, is how are we protecting IP when it comes to AI and the use of AI. Now is our Q&A section of the webinar. We really value this time. You've got access to some experts here on the webinar. So yeah, give us your insights, drop your questions in the chat, and we'll go through them. We do have one that came through. So what, if anything, can I do to help the team I work on understand that AI tools are not evil per se, but can be used in limited and useful ways on the content we work on? That's a great question, and definitely touches on some of the training and overall education around the use of AI. So very much so, one of the elements here is that AI is here, it's new technology, it's gonna get used, right? And I think I love this question as portraying it as not particularly evil, right? We're not sitting here on this call saying AI is bad, destroy AI, don't use it, right? Every point that we've kind of come across is, hey, understand there are risks here, and being aware of that and being able to assess and evaluate that is actually pretty huge in this process. And that should lead to giving your team some more insights around that. So if you're initially assessing the risk of a vendor, you can establish some of those guardrails with your team members in terms of what data can be used and how to actually utilize that. Nick, do you see any other areas of providing advice to team members on the use of AI?
Yeah, actually, I mean, this is part of the conversations that I'm having on a near daily basis, about the evils of AI and and its application. And what I try to explain to people is, like, saying AI is evil is like saying computers are evil, or saying that everybody, every every email program is evil type of thing. It's like there's too vast of an understanding of what it is and how it is to be done. So I think that the way we try to work with it is very much Parker, to your comments as well. Like get your evaluations done, have it be the tool recommended by leadership for AI. Saying no tools are recommended will just cause people to run around and say, well, that's not practical. You know, like I'm not gonna try to do my job with both hands tied behind my back, swimming underwater. That's what business is asking anybody to do work anymore without these AI tools, these new AI tools in place is. But they can say, look, Microsoft Copilot, we vetted it. It is valid. It may not be the greatest tool in the world. It may not do everything you want to do, but this is the AI tool that we have signed off on and we can validate, and because it meets these standards, which we hold dear to the company type of thing. If we find a new tool that also meets those standards that we can afford, we will go with that one type of thing. We'll evaluate it, we'll then do that. And at least it gives everybody a path, right? Now, all of a sudden, it's not evil. Some are evil, some are not evil. This one is good, that one's bad, and it kind of lets everybody find their friends in the room. And I think that's your path to adoption.
Yeah, I love that. There's a lot here too in terms of enabling your teams to actually utilize these components to be more productive, to be more effective in different ways. And that's where it is important that if you lay that out, if this does meet our standards, so have at it, right? Run with it and utilize it to the extent that it's useful to you. So especially when it comes to any kind of content creation, if you do have something like that Copilot example, you could be a writer per se here and write something, but then utilize Copilot to add some additional nuance into that, right? And so that could be something, because the organization's approved, would be helpful, right? Where you're like, I'm not quite getting what my head's out of this, maybe some AI would be helpful, right? So that's where it's really important to understand, yeah, if we have approval, great, you can upload a script potentially and say, hey, give me some, production tips or whatever around that. And that you can do that effectively and securely. Another question we've got, do you find certain AIs work better or are more secure compared to others? Adobe and Grammarly have their own built into their apps, but there are ones such as ChatGPT and Gemini. This is one of those areas that you do have to consider your use of the tool, right? So I wouldn't inherently say, hey, here's your top rated, most secure AI organization or implementation of AI, because it comes down to the individual use case for your organization. What data are you going to use? And that should impact what security controls that you expect from these vendors, right? So if there is just a general sense of, hey, I've got just numbers on a spreadsheet that don't tie to anything as intellectual property or as trademark or anything, and I just need AI to run a quick calculation on this, like, hey, calculate these totals. Any model is really going to work for you. You don't necessarily need high security to utilize that. So I think that's really where I can't give you a firm answer on this company works the best. It is, you have to assess that for your specific use case. And Nick, I don't know if you've seen any legal contracts structured better than others with any of these organizations.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my point here, is that the tool at which you can get an SLA for, or service level agreement for, where they're going to commit to certain security practices and commit to certain release packages and bug fix timeframes and standards of which you hold in your company, that's the most secure one, the one that will commit to you. And I think that we're seeing very, very few willing to do that, and that's because, to be quite frank, they don't know how it works. So they can't put any reliance upon it. They can't tell you it's secure or not secure. They don't know. And there's great research being done right now. This is a huge area of trying to figure it out and learn from it. And there's, I mean, what we know today versus what we knew literally just 2 months ago is a vast amount of additional structure on how these tokens form themselves in the model and how they can be outputted and manipulated and not manipulated, and what we can do around that. And so I'd say your security is going to be very low. Your trust in any company saying they're secure should be even lower until they're ready to put down pen to paper, say, I will let you see in court if I don't meet these standards. That's when you'll know it's secure, because until they reach that moment, you know, us lawyers won't let them sign that document.
Yeah, that's some great additional insight there of everyone can say, yeah, we've got a secure platform, but until they put pen to paper and actually own that liability, you can't fully trust that. One last question I think we've got time for here is how do you think AI will affect the way movies are delivered and consumed in 10 years from now? How is this actually going to impact the media and entertainment industry? This is a interesting question in the sense of trying to get me to predict how this is going to result in 10 years from now, when this was vaguely on the radar just a few years ago. And like we've talked about, is accelerating constantly and quickly. But I think what we're currently seeing is a lot of augmentation, right? So you can see a lot of work improving or productivity increasing in different ways, that whether it's a machine learning algorithm or a large language model or generative AI, you are seeing some increased productivity in that. So you can augment some components of work, and especially mundane tasks, a lot more effectively and efficiently, because it's a little bit easier to communicate in a language and say, I have this problem, help me with it. And getting some results and feedback can help you build and, you know, automate some processes that you wanted to previously, but you didn't know how to communicate in technical terms to actually execute that. So when we're talking about media and entertainment specifically, we've already seen it in generating background actors, right? And generating content that is kind of not widely accepted, right? There's contracts with Actor Guild and a couple other areas that really are like, no, you still need real people for these. So I think those are the areas where you're going to see AI more as a background element still, because there's a lot of people at play here and nobody wants to be fully replaced by AI. I think the intent and the hope here is that we can augment the work that we do with AI. So we can improve the speed at which we deliver some VFX, right? We can improve the results and consistency across these things. But at the end of the day, I think you still have humans at play here, and you're still going to see that come across the screen. Nick, I don't know if you've got any big predictions for the next 10 years.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to be very conservative on this. I know attorney being conservative, this shocks everybody on the call here, but I'm going to be very conservative on this because the laws, I believe, especially around copyright and intellectual property protection, have to dramatically change in the way that it actually treats AI-generated content. Because if you go to the extent of media entertainment and you create a work, you spending the millions of dollars necessary to do so with all the human and non-human actors, and it ends up not being copyrightable, not being monetizable, being something that people can easily pirate and steal and share without consequence online. I think that you'll find a huge backlash against the use of those technologies in that way. And we don't have great guidance right now from the Copyright Office. We know that a purely generated AI image is fine, and we know that an AI enhanced image can be copyrighted, type of thing. And we don't know how much requirement there is in the middle. At what percentage does it become a non-copyrightable image, and of what percentage of a film's enhancement through VFX or any other elements of AI becomes non-copyrightable. The loss of that protection under US law will be a complete abandonment of AI tools for most major studios, I think, as a backlash in that way, and it could cause a problem. So I'd say if in the next 10 years we have a modernization of the Lanham Act and the Copyright Act, we'll see an explosion of AI in media and entertainment in a way that's never been seen before. And absent that, I think it'll be a fringe tool, helped mostly for indie films and for productivity enhancements in a pipeline, rather than being a critical part of the future. But that's just a prediction. I don't know anything else that anybody else about it.
Yeah, well, we reserve the right to change our mind on that at any point. Thank you, everyone, for joining. When you close out, you're going to get the survey. Please do fill that out. It's helpful feedback for us. Thank you, Nick, for joining. Do get in touch if you've got any more questions. And again, on assessing these vendors, give us a ring and we'll help you out. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Parker, for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Bye.
Take care.